Hello. Right, so we've got a choice this year, and this is it. Either we can have Labour MPs, a parliamentary Labour Party writhing around as a self-indulgent morass, obsessed with their own self-indulgence, internal machinations, or, and here's a controversial thought, we could focus our fire on a government whose policies are shredding the welfare state, which is driving millions of people further into insecurity and hardship, attacking many of the institutions that so many of us are proud of. That's the choice. So we've got 6 things, let's start with 6, that all Labour MPs should unite on to hold this government to account, the Conservatives, the people actually in power, whilst Labour MPs squabble amongst themselves. So, number 1, cuts to universal credit. Can't be talked about enough. Cuts to universal credit. Cuts to universal credit. I will keep saying it until it catches on. There was the U-turn on tax credits. But now instead what the Tories are doing is cutting universal credit, a new system that's coming in place as the social security system in this country. Now, their hope is people think, oh, the U-turn on tax credits. Fine now, isn't it? What are people complaining about? We can't fall into that trap. Cuts to universal credit are going to leave millions of working families potentially worse off. Hundreds, if not thousands of pounds worse off. According to Owen Smith, that's Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, a single mum who's working full-time on the minimum wage could be almost £3,000 worse off under universal credit than a mother in precisely the same circumstances on tax credits. According to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, they're the big wigs who try and hold all governments to account for the impact of their policies, the long-run impact of tax and benefit changes because of the government's policies between May 2015, when the Tories won the election, and April 2019, mean that if you're in the poorest 10% of society, then you could be more than 6% worse off. And the second poorest, you can lose up to 8% of your income. Middle-income people aren't as badly affected, but they're still going to lose out money, which they desperately need for them, their kids, their families, their futures. They think they've got away with it, but everybody needs to talk about this, because there are millions of working families out there who have no interest whatsoever in the internal machinations of the Labour Party. They don't know who all these MPs are, but it is in their interest that the Labour Party represents their interests and takes a fight to the government which wants to empty their pockets of money they desperately need. Number 2, the National Health Service, one of our proudest institutions as a country. Now, the junior doctors, our treasured public servants, are on strike at the moment. And that's because the government are imposing a contract on these already overworked people, which could see them working far more hours, robbing them of a remotely healthy work-life balance. Not that many of them already have that. They're already paid less than many other university graduates. They're people we all depend on. They save our lives, they keep us healthy. Now we've got newspapers like The Sun trying to smear them as though they're out there living the high life. I mean, what sort of society do we live in where we're not holding to account tax dodgers, the banks who plunged us into economic calamity, poverty-paying bosses? No. Instead we have newspapers smearing doctors who save our lives. The junior doctors aren't just striking for themselves, and if you go and speak to them, they'll always make this point. It's about the NHS, the longest squeeze in funding in its history. Policies of marketisation, privatisation, fragmentation, yeah, carry on the work of what previous governments did, but which are undermining the National Health Service, stripping the national from the NHS.
There is a problem of NHS funding.
Labour, the party that founded the NHS, if it can't get the government on the defensive on the NHS, it might as well give up. 3, the economy. Now, George Osborne's already trying to get his excuses in, because remember what happened last time. The Conservatives backed every single penny of Labour spending.
The Conservatives will be spending the same as the Labour Party, although we hope to spend it a great deal better.
But then, when the crash happened, they said it was Labour's spending on schools and hospitals, which they backed, which caused the calamity of the financial crash, the consequences of which we're still facing today. But George Osborne this time, he's saying, oh no, what? I know we blamed the Labour government last time for the entire global economic system collapsing. However, this time, If there's a disaster, it's not our fault. No, global economic conditions.
A dangerous cocktail of new threats from around the world.
There's a very calm, placid advice coming from the Royal Bank of Scotland. Sell everything ahead of stock market crash, says RBS economists, is the headline in The Guardian. And according to the RBS, investors face a cataclysmic year where stock markets could fall by up to 20%. China, of course, at the moment, huge economic problems. Now, I'm not going to blame, obviously, George Osborne for those economic conditions. But what I will say is the economy in Britain is ridiculously underprepared for any potential coming storm, unless you think that an unbalanced economy and a house price bubble is a way of having a sustainable recovery that can deal with the mounting economic turmoil, potentially, that this country and so many other countries could face. Now, John McDonnell is making the case that George Osborne's policies have left us exposed to these economic disasters that could be lurking. So what Labour need to do is focus above all else on the fact we're not prepared, and as well come up with an alternative. Talk about workable alternatives to the policies, Osborneomics, whatever you want to call it, which have failed so badly to create any sustainable recovery, not least for the next generation. Number 4, housing. This should be fish in a barrel. We have an epic housing crisis in this country. We've got, up to 5 million people languishing on social housing waiting lists. We have an unregulated private rented sector, up to 11 million tenants with insecure tenancies, often paying through the nose with rip-off rents. As a result, a housing benefit bill which has spiralled because we're not building the housing that this country so desperately needs. Home ownership's been falling for years, and for those who are under 34, home ownership's been in collapse. So there's so many things to talk about, not least because the government is driving through legislation which is an all-out attempt to just shred what remaining social housing this country has, hiking up social rents to unaffordable market rents. My colleague at The Guardian, Aditya Chakraborty, has written an excellent piece about this. So the government are building these starter homes, and by 2020, they will require an annual income of £77,000 a year and a deposit of £98,000. Now, how many people out there can afford homes like that? The government are abolishing secure tenancies for council housing, turning council housing ever more into a transit camp where you have those most in need, often those with the most problems, concentrated increasingly into what will resemble ghettos. Take this stat from Aditya. If you were to buy your own home and you're on the average wage of £26,500, 91% of England and Wales is now beyond your reach. So there's a huge opportunity here. Labour have to hammer them on social housing, the private rented sector, and also home ownership. 3 prongs on which this government's record is a calamity. Number 5, cuts to support for disabled people. Now, if the test of a civilised society is how we treat people who are sick and disabled, then my goodness, how this society fails. Now, over the last few years, we've had a battery of cuts, attacks on social security for sick and disabled people. Here's a case that was revealed last week. Dawn Amos, 67 years old, from Essex. Now, she was sent a letter that told her she was no longer qualified for sickness benefits. And on that day, she died. That is a pretty upsetting example. But there are far more examples out there of people who are sick and disabled who are having the support they desperately need taken away. Now, the way we win these arguments isn't talking about statistics, it's about talking about human beings. Human beings like Dawn. People who this government expect to suffer in silence. If Labour can't give a voice to those people, and all Labour MPs can't unite around cases like that, then they might as well pack up and go home. So let's have far more than that as well. Number 6, Saudi Arabia. Labour and foreign policy are not exactly united exactly at the moment, but I think there are points on which there can be agreement. And I think one is Britain's sordid alliance with Saudi Arabia. Now, the issue about Saudi Arabia is not just about violation of human rights. They are a threat to the national security of the people of this country because they are exporting international extremism the world over. Saudi Arabia are conducting an awful bombing campaign at the moment in Yemen, which is killing many, many innocent people. But as well as that, of course, risks increasing the sort of radicalisation, extremism, which is such a threat to so many people. But do you know what the British government did to this terrible menace to our national security? What they did is a secret deal with the Saudi tyranny in order to get Saudi Arabia elected, wait for it, to the UN Human Rights Council, a head-chopping, women-oppressing, gay-murdering regime elected to the UN Human Rights Council because of our government. Now, I've only come up with 6 things. There are so many other things that I could come up with. But now, above all else, Labour have to unite to hold this government to account, to focus every bit of firepower that the Labour Party has on all of these things, and at the same time, come up with a coherent, inspiring alternative that resonates with the majority in society. I don't want to come up with a blame game, but how do you think Labour can move forward and become this inspiring, genuine alternative to what the Tories are doing? So leave your comments, subscribe as ever, and I'll see you next time.